And YouTube. Okay.
Welcome to the show, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of
Just a squirrel
looking
for a nut.
for a nut,
Trying to get out of this
rut.
rut.
Well, who are you?
It worked out okay.
Welcome back to the show. So, for those of you who are regulars, including Melody, who I see has popped into the house, and anyone who may be viewing this on replay, just be aware that tonight Oleg is not available, and neither is regular co-host Chris Sykes. So it is Brian Goldsack and me who are going to be hanging out in the show tonight. Brian, just briefly tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you? What you do? What is your function in this world?
So I am Brian Goldsack. I am the co-host of the Success Fundamentals podcast with my buddy Chris Sykes. Super excited to be here. I am a financial advisor and a father of twins.
That's a lot of hats you're wearing.
It's a lot.
I hope your head's big. Do you have more than one head?
I have a big head, Scott.
Well, talk about someone who's got a big head, or I should say a big brain. We've got someone else in the house with us tonight. Maybe this person's going to show himself. Oh!
Hey.
There he is.
I'm happy to
and
have
I do have a big head.
Hey, it looks good on you, man.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Joe, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Joe Bogdan. Hey, first of all, before we even get started, I wanted to talk about how great that intro was. You guys sounded like you rehearsed that multiple times. It was like an orchestra. so perfect. But
in sync.
We're gonna have a different show about integrity sometime. And is it okay to lie? But thank you. You made me feel good. My self-esteem was down in the dumps tonight. Let's start with our story of the night.
So
we're gonna talk about Orpheus, the most charismatic human being who ever lived in Greek mythology. Orpheus was an incredible singer. He played the lyre, which is a harp-like instrument, and he primarily sang songs of joy. He went on a mission with the famous hero Jason on a ship called the Argonauts, or the Argo, to get the Golden Fleece. And while he was on that trip, he fell in love with another one of the Argonauts and sang tons and tons of love songs to this man, all of which we've forgotten. Then later, he sang even more love songs to this woman named Eurydice, who he met and ultimately decided to marry. And can you imagine having a fantastic musician as your spouse at your wedding who decides to play all these love songs to you? Now, from what I understand, those love songs had a dance beat. Mm-hmm. And the reason we know that is because Eurydice was a disco diva. Eurydice was dancing to the music that Orpheus was playing during the wedding, and she got into a total fever. Her hair was spinning around, wilder and wilder, and spinning faster and faster. And then she accidentally stepped barefoot on a pit of vipers and died on the spot. Can you imagine how Orpheus must have felt? He was inconsolate for a long time, but then he realized he had the capacity to do something about it. He developed a mission, and it was the most audacious mission in the entire history of humanity. He was determined to bring Eurydice back from the dead. And so with his lyre, he put himself into focus. He thought about what he wanted to say, why Eurydice needed to be back in the world. He walked down to Hades itself, determined to sing a song about his love for Eurydice and to convince the lord and lady that ruled the underworld to release Eurydice back into the world of sunshine. We'll talk about what happened because of that mission at some point during this show, I have no doubt. But it goes as to the central question of the hour. How do you find your mission? Brian, I'm going to start by asking you, do you know your mission?
Do I know my mission? I don't. I feel that is actually one of my struggles, Scott. I feel like I have so many different missions going on at the same time that I don't identify with any particular one of them, perhaps other than being a father and a husband as like an overarching mission for my life. So that's why I'm so excited to be part of this conversation. Maybe I can uncover my mission today. Joe, I wonder if you can help me with that.
I'll do my best. Now, Scott, I think we skipped over me introducing myself. So let me just do that real quick.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I can't believe I did that.
Well, you went into
I got so wrapped up in the story. And because it goes as to why you're here.
Actually,
Joe, who are you?
So I blame myself for that. But, Joe Bogdan, I'm the senior enlisted leader of the 51st Civil Engineer Squadron at Osan Air Base in Korea, which means I'm basically an advisor. I'm responsible for organizing and training, equipping troops to handle our mission here at our base. So been in the service about 21 years, served all over the world, used SAFE, which is Europeans in Europe, over in Asia, multiple countries, and of course, I've deployed to the Middle East a couple times. So I've been all over the States as well. And just right now, I'm responsible for leading about 600 people and just executing. Our mission here is to just deliver engineering capabilities to our installation, as well as building partnership capacity with our internal and external partners, as well as a big part of our mission here is to develop exceptional leaders. So that's part of it as well. So that's kind of what I do. I'm also a podcast host of the Lama Leadership Podcast, which has service members and veterans, and we get together and talk about all things life learning and leadership. And finally, I guess I'm an adjunct professor of leadership studies at one of the universities at University of Massachusetts Global. So that's a little bit about me. I'm also a husband, which is one of my primary missions and jobs, and it's the one I'm most proud of, actually.
I don't understand. I've been married. Well, I've been with my husband. It wasn't always legal for us to be married, but I've been with my husband 24 years. I've never considered being a good husband a mission. What are you people talking about? That's just something I do for fun.
Oh, yeah.
Mission being a good husband. Why would being a good spouse be a mission of any sort to anybody?
I think missions don't have to be something that you feel like is a taxing job, right? I think missions, to me, I think there's a difference between a vision and a mission. My vision is to develop world championship winning coaching trees. That's, for me, is to help people. That's my perfect end state, is leave a legacy of growing effective leaders in their home life or in their professional life. But missions, I think, they change through seasons, and then also could be enduring missions as well. And I think an enduring mission I have is to every day earn the right to be the husband of my wife, to wake up and be deliberate in the actions to make sure that I take care of her, that I show her that she's valued, and to provide and protect, and she doesn't need a provider. She's also active duty. She's a master sergeant in the Air Force, but I still my job is to provide and cultivate as much as I can, So I think missions, they come in different forms.
What made you decide to pursue this particular mission in your life, Joe?
The one of being a good husband?
Actually, I would say any of the missions. I mean, I know some of them you may not have a choice in, but some of them you presumably did have a choice in. Like, to pursue leadership development as a vocation. Talk to us a little bit about that.
I think that what you just said about the word vocation is important, right? So I had Richard Shell on, and a friend of ours, right? And thank you for introducing us. And you know what he said? There's a difference between jobs, careers, and vocations, right? And I think that's very true. We've all had those jobs, and right now, my mission. My career is wearing the uniform, serving our nation, right? But my vocation is teaching. And I think that being able to align your whatever that mission might be, a temporary mission or it might be an enduring mission, with your vocation, I think that's important. And I think throughout my time in my career, I think about year 11, 12, I started doing, I got some career broadening experience and got to work at the social services center on the base, which most installations will have one. And I realized, I started growing and learning things about generosity and empathy and all those other things that I didn't have as a younger service member. I grew and I realized that my vocation is to teach and help people reach their maximum potential. So the missions that I get to choose in life, I try to make sure that they align with my vocation, right? And it's to help people reach their potential.
See, I'm envious of all this. It's so clear. The way Joe describes this is crystal clear. He categorizes mission, vocation. My mind says I have all of these different strengths, certain weaknesses. So Joe and Scott, how do you differentiate? Like, how do you know what your vocation is? At what point did you say, I think I am meant to be a teacher?
Yeah. So I think for me, it took a while. I love Viktor Frankl's quote when he talks about we detect our meaning in life, we don't invent it. And I was navigating through. And I think at some point I stepped outside my comfort zone. I had a mentor that pushed me into the social services realm, and I didn't think I would do that. That's not what I should do, right? I'm more of an executor. I take care of what we say mission, right? I just execute whatever tasks, manage work centers, and I was living within my comfort zone. And when my mentor pushed me out, that's when a whole new world existed for me. And I think I've always had the work ethic, but I didn't have the people skills and some of those relationship building skills that are very important for us to really navigate through this interdependent world. And once I started gaining those, I started broadening, and I realized what really brings me not just joy but contentment overall. Right. What makes I hate the adage, love what you do and you'll never work a day of your life, because I love what I do and I put in a grind. Sometimes I come home and I feel like I went through a meat grinder. Right. So I don't think that's true, but I think what it does is helps you stay focused and framed correctly. And I think that's just really, really helped me align. And it took a while. I had to work through identifying my core values, my leadership philosophy, and then all those kind of aligned up and develop my vision. And now, you know what, it's easy. I don't drift left and right as much. I have a focus, and whenever I feel like I'm all over the place, I just go back to what I feel is the most important to me. It's been easy to prioritize a little bit more.
In terms of my own mission, it occurred, I found it after really struggling for a long time, living a life that I was unhappy about. I went to law school because I felt that the skills that professional education was able to leverage were my skills, as opposed to other professional postgraduate professional opportunities, which either were hyper boring to me, like academics, or focused on skills that were not my strengths, like the sciences or medicine. Business, if I had been a little bit more broad-minded, probably would have been the best opportunity of all, but I saw that as purely quantitative, and also was just thought that, okay, that's a disaster waiting to happen. And I really felt that I was not going to, with the literature degree that I had, live the lifestyle that I wanted. But I had to wander in the wilderness for a long time. I figured out within 1 week of starting law school that it was a poor fit. I hated it. I remember talking to my parents almost immediately. I was like, these people are pompous. It's boring. Everything is hyper arcane and it's hyper detail oriented. Not only that, but as I got deeper and deeper into it, it was all about fighting and squabbling, or all about facilitating either destruction or creation, but not actually doing the creation. You were just making sure that the paperwork and that the legal niceties that were in place for something to be created were appropriately completed. You weren't the actual creator of anything. And so I was deeply unhappy, and it took me a long time to get out of it because the amount of debt that I accrued was so massive that it was next to impossible for me to pay off until I was in my 40s, actually. And then I also felt that even after 1 year of law school, my parents were immediately, and this made sense at the time, they were like, don't quit. You want to see this through. You got into this great law school, finish it, or at least finish 1 year. And by the time I finished the first year, the debt load was so high, I actually felt I couldn't afford not to finish because I wouldn't be able to get a job with the prior degree that I had that paid enough in order for me to be able to pay off even that first year of debt. So I ended up with an even more massive debt, but at least was employable. But it took me until my debt was paid off and then sometime afterwards to figure out what I wanted or what my mission was, because the amount of work too that you have to, it's deadline driven, it's tedious, it's micro oriented. So the sheer amount of work that can hit you when you're a lawyer is so enormous that I didn't have a lot of time to think about who I was and what I wanted to be. And Joe, when you talked a little bit earlier about drifting, that is exactly how I felt for many years, utterly adrift.
Do you think you had to go through that though to be able to find out what that mission is? Because I think that sometimes when we have to go through those experiences, and sometimes it's your family or other people putting their expectations on you of projecting their mission on you of what they think your mission should be, right? And then you go through that, and also if you can't make enough money to survive because of debt and everything else, then it's going to be really hard to find your mission. You know what I mean? Because you're so focused on just getting to the next day. So I think in life, we have to go through all of those things before we can really start to self-actualize and identify what those important things are to us. And I don't think anybody should be in a rush to get there.
The only response I have to that, though, is that did I have to go through it? Looking back on it in hindsight, in order to really credentialize myself as a viable presence in the space that I want to be in, I probably did have to have that because it provides such a powerful credential that I can very easily use that to support myself as someone as anyone is going to listen to about anything. And by the way, I assume that credential itself and the experience that I derived because of it was part of why I was even able to be considered at all as a guest on both of your shows, both of which are particular about who you put in front of your audiences. And so perhaps did I have to, but would I have found it another way? One thing that happened to me in 2021 is I went through a very lengthy personal branding exercise and worked with some people who were I worked with one group that was supposed to be an expert in this, and they didn't know what to do with me. That's long and short of that. The second person said, Scott, the reason they didn't know what to do with you is because you're actually a creative artist and they're not managing you and you're not being treated as a creative artist. You need to be addressed and managed and directed as a creative artist. And when that happens, you will find your mission, you will find your purpose, you'll find what you stand for. And within 3 months of starting to work with that person, my mission, my purpose, and what I stand for was crystal clear.
So I just want to throw a challenging, what I perceive to be a challenging thought to the group. So mission seems so clear, vocation seems so clear. One thing I've always identified with is the idea of being like a Renaissance man, a person that is good at a variety of different things, has a variety of different interests, can speak about literature, philosophy, business, psychology, etc. at length, but not really be really good at any one of those things. Is there still an option out there for guys like me, or is it like that's just a waste? Just pick one and go with it.
I think that I think there's a lot of value in that. So I wanted to go back to Viktor Frankl. Ken, he talks about purpose, right, and how important it is. And he has this thing called the meaning triangle. And he talks about like there's 3 points to that. One's creativity, something you're giving to the world. And I would say that probably teaching as a vocation is in that realm of giving something to the world. Even people that find their meaning and purpose in their children, I think that although that can be a little bit dangerous because kids leave eventually, right?
That's a good point.
I think that that's also in the realm of creativity. There's also self-actualization or constant improvement, right? But the other one that he talks about is experience, just experiencing what the world has, learning and be staying inspired. And I think that purpose, having that part as at least part of your purpose, I think that's important. And I think that can really align you to whatever that mission might be. And I just go back to I think a military perspective that we talk about pretty often is, you have your battles, you have your campaigns, you have your long enduring missions, and sometimes you have your missions of the day, right? You have your mission for that week. You have that quick mission. So sometimes we have to really just identify what mission are we on at that moment. James Cars talks about the finite versus infinite game. Is this mission to help you in the finite portion of your life, or is it that enduring for that infinite piece? I think that's really important for us to kind of do that inner work to find, figure that piece out.
Jessica, it's so good to see you. And you all, I had a technical issue a second ago. Thank you for your patience with me. But hey, that's part of the joy and the excitement of live stream. We have to laugh with it. We learn to roll with it. And it is yet another obstacle in the mission.
Mm-hmm.
So Scott, I was trying to click on some of these comments and have them pop up, but nothing's happening. I don't know if you're like
that's fine. I'll manage it.
I actually see them come up, and Melody, I appreciate that introduced you to the Angels 14 on LinkedIn. I'm actually very connected to them. I haven't had them on the podcast yet, but amazing human beings. Bun is amazing, and so is the entire team. So,
and Jessica, it is good to have you back here. And you knew that I would be back. Thank you so much, Melody. It would be, when I was about 14, I read all of this sort of end of the world, according to the Bible literature when I was a teenager. One day I took a nap and I woke up and my entire family was gone. I was convinced that the rapture had occurred and I'd been left behind. And so, for all you know, the rapture could have happened. And you sinners are stuck having to deal with it. And
right now.
Like, oh man, I'm still here.
And look who's in the house. Oleg is here. Oleg, you're traveling. It's good to have you in the audience. Thank you for that. I've always believed that I get to choose my purpose, then refine from time to time. But do you believe you get to choose your purpose, or does your purpose get chosen for you? Yo, someone's got to tackle. Oleg, you're making us think again.
It goes back to what I said earlier about that Viktor Frankl quote about detecting your meaning. I think that I used to think that I made everything for myself, but I do believe that there's a calling. There's something that calls you towards your purpose and meaning, and it happens in different parts of your life. And sometimes you got to go through a storm. Sometimes you got to go outside of your comfort zone to find it. I think my biggest fear would be to never be able to live to that potential. And I don't think that you can live to your maximum potential without identifying what your calling is.
Well, that actually goes back to something that in the discussion about law school got lost in my little train of thought here, which was sometimes you have to go through things in order to be able to find your purpose. Joe, you referenced that earlier. And part of why I don't know how I feel about that and go back and forth about it is that there is a transitory nature to our existence, and it has a habit of ending at times that are inconvenient. So my big example of that was on 9/11, right? There were 3,000 people that went to work that day, and who knows, maybe they hadn't found their purpose yet. I bet a lot of them hadn't. And yet there they were, jumping out of a 100-story building to their death. And did they have to go through anything to have found their purpose? Would the world have somehow been better if they had found their mission and been able to accomplish it before they died? Or perhaps is it that whatever mission they had in life, they might not even have realized that they had it. Maybe it was something that they didn't detect yet, but they fulfilled, at least by the time that they passed on.
I think about that all the time. I think to myself, if a meteorite just hit me right now, moments before it hit me, would I say, hey, at least I was doing exactly what I wanted to do? I don't know if I could say that, right? Sometimes I feel like this is perfect, but then sometimes I feel that there's this thing in my heart that's like, you got to explore more and experience new things. How do you know you're not supposed to be like a chef or something? You don't know until you try, right?
Right.
So then I guess I say that to say, like, that calling aspect, is it almost like divine in nature where you go, I finally found it? Or is it more of like, I'm seeing that my efforts tend to gravitate in this direction? And if it's the latter, isn't that subject to change from time to time?
Yeah. Then I keep going back to this. I think I differentiate even vocation with mission. I think that, you can even say it like mission in life. I can understand how that would be that enduring mission. I think that your missions may shift. I think your calling is probably going to stay the same. That's just my perspective on it. I think that if your calling constantly shifts, you probably haven't really found your calling yet. But I think your missions shift, and some of that mission might be trying to find your calling. I mean, that could be a mission. So that's why I think that sometimes we shift missions depending on what the need is, what our personal needs are. It might be early on in life or even middle of your life. Hopefully, your part of your mission is self-mastery. And when you're working on that self-mastery, maybe you'll start determining some of the other broader things.
I don't know if this relates to it or not, but Jessica, you actually raised something in this very interesting comment that I'm not sure if I understood. And Brian and Joe, if you understand it a little bit more deeply, maybe you could begin to address it. But at a minimum, Jessica, I ask that you maybe spend a couple of seconds to clarify a little bit further. When you say when you talk about this dance between your passions and what you might feel emotionally and what your body says, what exactly do you mean by that? When you say what your body says, I mean, I might personally associate that, for instance, with food or with exercise or with some other sort of exertion or something that is taxing on the body. Is that what you're talking about? And I'm curious as to what extent then it raises some other questions, like the ability and the tools that one needs to adapt their mission to changing physical circumstances. And an example that I heard about once was a man who this is a very sad story. When he was young, he had a regular, normal corporate job where I think he wanted to climb the corporate ladder, and that was his mission, or at least what he perceived his mission to be. And during one of his summer breaks, he was at a beach house with a bunch of friends, and he came home after a night of drinking, and he climbed up onto the diving board and decided to do a late night swim. So he dived off, and there was no water in the pool.
What?
Yes. And so he was, as you can imagine, a quadriplegic.
Wow.
Now, he was able to adjust his mission. Apparently, what he does is provide some sort of, he invented some sort of lotions and creams and things like that apparently really help the bed sores or the other sorts of bruising that comes from the combination of not really being able to move your body, particularly your legs and your buttocks and your back, with the sweating that might impact how well you actually, if you're a quadriplegic, I believe you can't sweat, but with
Really? Wow.
yeah, I found that out a very
that.
interesting way that we could talk about actually that goes us to mission. But with not being able to move and circulation issues and it constantly touching the wheelchair or whatever it is that you're sitting in, then it can cause a lot of pain and skin damage and breakdown and all this stuff. This cream helps with that, and so he found his mission. Although I can't help but wonder, I read or saw his story on in a PBS documentary on happiness, and then I met someone who actually had dated him, and part of the point was that by finding his mission through these terrible sets of circumstances, he had found happiness. But then part of me was like, is he really happy? Like, I hate to say that. I feel like I'm a monster even asking that. But if he could trade that happiness for the chance to have the use of his body again, would he? And if he would, then is he truly happy? Yeah, I mean, really only he can answer the question, but it's something interesting for us to think about.
Yeah. When that's a tough one, because I think that's the one I do lean on my divine faith, because it's really hard to know what other people are dealing with, and what might, what everything that they went through to get to where they're at, right? It's probably even built up to that scenario before the jump, right? So some of it could be just the mission must change because there's no option, right? There's no other option, and maybe that is what you're supposed to go somewhere. Hard for me to really kind of get into that, but I think what she was talking about, the passion and the indicators of those feelings. I think feelings, I mean, once again, are indicators. They're not necessarily dictators. Liza Turker said that. I think it's really important for us to understand that, and I think that when it comes down to having that mission, or even the long-term vision, or who you really are, your meaning and purpose, we talk about all those things. I think it helps you stay self-disciplined, and to just see those feelings as indicators, not dictators. You see these things like, I want to be, if one of my missions is to be an outstanding husband, I got to be healthy and be around. I got to have that longevity to take care of my wife. If it's that mission is also to cultivate her, I need to continue to grow, right? So it leads me to down a path of self-discipline for myself, versus just kind of drifting in whatever I feel that day. I don't feel like running today, it'll be fine, or I don't feel like learning today, I don't feel like going to work, call in sick. I think that just being aligned with what you really feel is your quote unquote mission or purpose or meaning in life, I think it just helps you stay the course.
How important do you think self-discipline is, Brian?
It's probably one of the most important aspects of achieving anything. It reminds me of the word resolute, right? To be a person that's resolute is to continue on with something that you set your mind to long after the excitement of that project or activity has diminished. So how are you going to do that if the emotions of it fizzled out? You need discipline. So if you're, I was guilty of this myself when I was in my 20s. I would have all these different ideas. I'd be excited about these ideas. I would, stick to, like, I wanted to open a beer brewery for years.
Yeah.
And I stuck to it for like 3 months. And then I had to actually do something beyond just thinking. And then it all went away. If I remained disciplined, if I actually set like regimented goals and stuck to trying to pursue those goals, I might be running a beer brewery right now.
Well, or you might end up like me. I was disciplined and finished law school, and then end up in debt until I was 41 and not able to get out of it, all because of self-discipline.
But look at you now. You're here.
That's right. I would never have the bank of horror stories in my life that I do had I not had that self-discipline to force me through law school so I could accrue that debt that kept me
well, we talked about this. You talked about some mythology earlier, right? But like, what about the story of Hercules, the choice of Hercules, right? You could have went down one route and went through hell, basically, and became legendary, or I went down the road of ease and nobody would have ever known your name.
Absolutely. Thank you for letting me know I'm legendary.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're legendary.
Good. You are. Well, I've got a lot more work to do. We're just a whole little bastion of legends here. But then what about people that become extraordinarily successful despite a lack of self-discipline? I'll say a name here. I'm not going to say any names of anyone who is alive right now, but Marlon Brando comes to mind as an example of someone who was maybe a little bit less than self-disciplined and yet had massive success purely due to talent. I mean, he couldn't even remember his lines. And in terms of consumption of, he had some very bad habits that interfered with his life significantly. And many of them, at least theoretically, could have been controlled through self-discipline. Also, what about to what extent is the absence of self-discipline, from you all's perspective, personality characteristic, a personality like for lack of a better word, I know this isn't the correct clinical term, but a disorder of the personality, or to what extent is it a choice that one can or should be held responsible for?
Yeah. From a clinical perspective, I don't know if I could really get into. I'm sure some people have some disabilities that make it very difficult to stay self-disciplined. This guy, I mean, I'll go back to I'm an old generator mechanic, man. So I'm not sure so much about that perspective, but I would say that for a person that is well adjusted and have what they would deem as normal. I don't even know what normal really is nowadays. I think that most of us self-discipline is a choice. Sometimes it's a very difficult choice. If it was easy, everybody would have it. But I think that when you go back to the Marlon Brando thing, I don't know much about Marlon Brando. I loved The Godfather. That was a great movie. I don't even know if I loved it because of him necessarily. And I don't know what success looks like and what he defines success as. Maybe we all look at it and he was successful, but maybe he wasn't very happy. You know, so I don't know if that lack of self-discipline, if that is indeed the case, maybe success, because I think everybody has different white picket fences. Making a lot of money, probably that's not my white picket fence. Even becoming famous amongst people, I'll be honest with you, I don't know how many people, if I went to talk to my airmen, know who Marlon Brando is. Right. I mean, like, I don't know if they know who Teddy Roosevelt is, but I don't know if they know who Marlon Brando is, you know? So, you know, what does success really mean to people? What is it?
By the way, in addressing that, I want to make it clear that one thing that is tied into this and why Marlon Brando comes to mind immediately too, is because a lot of times people make assessments about whether people are successful in some endeavors in their life with the automatic judgment that the issue that they had that was keeping them from achieving whatever level of success and whatever metric we may want, or that's keeping them from overcoming their challenge, is a matter of self-discipline, when it's not always necessarily true. And then number two, it without acknowledging what I believe is the rarity or the extreme challenge that can come with actually implementing self-discipline. In other words, with living as a self-disciplined person. I hate it with a passion, when people, for instance, talk about weight challenges that people might have. And they say, oh, it's just a matter of self-discipline. They need to just put down a fork and shit like that. They don't know what challenges people have, and they don't know what dispositions they have. It's easy for me to be self-disciplined. That's something I've discovered about myself. I naturally will just say, I'll go hungry and just not eat. And that's not a challenge for me. So in fact, I even hate it when people say, oh, Scott, you're self-disciplined. That says a lot about your character. It doesn't say anything about my character, because it's so easy for me to naturally be self-disciplined that I feel like I was born with it. And other people that struggle with that issue, or maybe issues like, you know, staying focused when they read, or focused when they need to study, or intellectually engaged, or committed to finishing routine tasks that they need. People can snap judge as not being self-disciplined when really they may not have the capacity within them to experience or be a certain level of self-discipline, if the underlying issue, by the way, that we're talking about is even resolvable by self-discipline. Because I just feel like self-discipline is used as a club over people so many times.
It is. I think it is, but I think also there's something to it. And I think just if you're good at something and you easily do it, I don't think that you probably had to exert much self-discipline to do that. So maybe that's not a thing. I think that character and discipline, when I think about that, is you know, I say this pretty often, man. It's like if you put in 100% effort in the things you're good at, or the things you want to do, those shiny objects, you know, you look at it and you're like, oh, that's cool, I want to do that. To me, that's called normal. That's everybody wants to do that. I think that if you're disciplined enough to put that same effort into something that you really don't want to do, and that you might not be good at, that's called character. And I think that's where discipline and character kind of intersect, in my opinion.
I think that discipline nowadays is going to requires more effort than it once, you know, did. Right. So we're in a pretty cushy situation. I mean, if we were all on a, island in the South Pacific right now and had to create a society out of the jungle, right? Like there
we'd be in
wouldn't be,
trouble.
there wouldn't be like a guy that's just hanging out all day.
Yeah.
And like, come on, Bill, like you're gonna have to develop some discipline traits here to help us build tree houses. It's just like we're gonna eat that guy if he doesn't help us, right? So like, but once it's in a well-established society and things are pretty well taken care of for you, then discipline becomes optional. You could be disciplined if you want, but you don't have to be, because there's enough of a safety net to catch you for your
we've
lack of
nerfed all the
discipline.
corners. We've nerfed all the sharp edges in life. So now at this point, you don't necessarily have to be.
So I have fear with Scott's examples, because it's like, I mean, I think that you might be giving people an easy way out. Like, I think that by our very nature, we should be requiring people to have a certain degree of discipline over aspects of their life. That if it's creating a problem for you, there should be a part of you that wants to correct that. If you're having, I was the fat kid growing up. I had to get disciplined in order to lose weight. I had trouble focusing growing up. I had to find ways to be able to sit down and read so I can get my master's degree. So none of those things came easy to me, but I saw them as necessary in order for me to succeed in life. So I put in the effort to try to fix those issues, and that it all required discipline.
But what if you don't have the capacity to have that discipline? Like Jessica said, with regards to weight, people, that's an area, again, I want to say again, it really bugs me, because there are maybe metabolic factors, there may be genetic factors, there may be, there's a whole food industrial complex that people say is contributing to some of the challenges folks have around that. And again, I'm just using that. I don't want to tweak anyone and be, hurt anyone or anything like that and talk about this. So, but I do think I raise that, A, because it's said here, and B, that's just something that comes to mind that people are so quick to make statements about. Like I did martial arts training for a while. I want to say my martial arts skills sucked. I did it for 7 years. I got better. I would say I was on the low end of competent. I had the discipline to keep doing it. That part was easy, but I still never, with all my self-discipline, I still never became anything approaching a great martial artist, because I just didn't have the capacity to do that.
Yeah, then capacity is, it's hard to judge on where I can't say, like there was stuff that I started doing, and I'll say that I was disciplined enough to show up every day, but I didn't put in probably the effort that I probably needed to do to get to wherever it needs to go. I think there's a possibility there. I think when people have medical issues that create weight issues, because I was the fat kid growing up too, so I get it. But I think that when people have legitimate medical issues, there's still a place where discipline can live, or you can just not be accountable whatsoever and kind of just give up. I think there's a place there where discipline can exist to still help you get to a better place, whether that's still having to refine what you're eating because of your medical situation, or disciplined enough to make sure you take your medication, or whatever else it is. I think that there is a danger of using discipline as a just to curmudgeon people over, I mean, I think that's with everything, right? That's with everything. You can say that about anything, but I think that just my personal experience in my short time on this planet, when I'm disciplined enough to do the things that I don't necessarily feel like doing, I typically have better results on the other end of that.
Do you all also feel, though, that in this particular discussion, and particularly in the physical realm, although I would love to hear from Jessica, Melody, anyone else who's watching or listening around this, that this whole concept of self-discipline, at least as it's actualized and lived, almost has a cast of male supremacy in it? Because that's a very... Like, when I think about you need to be self-disciplined outside of Joan Crawford, and please, y'all, don't tell me none of you have heard who Joan Crawford is. You don't have no idea who Mommy Dearest is. It's bad enough that you don't know who Marlon Brando is. Come on, people. But Joan Crawford.
Hey, real quick, what Jessica said, don't know who Marlon Brando is. So I know who Marlon Brando is. But I guarantee if I asked my airmen who are born after the year 2000 something, they may not know who Marlon Brando is.
Well, are they going to know who Joan Crawford is? Have they heard of Mommy Dearest?
I don't think so because I haven't. I don't know who that is myself.
Well, that's a name. Brian, do you know who Joan Crawford and Mommy Dearest are?
I recognize the name Joan Crawford, but I don't follow any of her work.
Well, I don't either, but call your mom Mommy Dearest and she'll know exactly who you'll know exactly who Joan
to Google that later.
Yeah,
looking her up right
your
now.
ass whipped. But anyway, so Joan Crawford was a notoriously bad mother who, like you screamed and terrorized her children, and she, one of her children, her sons, urinated in the bed when he was a little boy, so she strapped him to the bed so that he have to soak in it and suffered, and it was like all about keeping the house super clean. She didn't want her daughters to put their clothes on wire hangers because it left creases in the dresses, and if they did, they got the living heck beat out of them. And so anyway, she was someone that was notorious for discipline. Actually, there is a movie scene that's out there. You can see it on YouTube where she's like coming up. She's like this tough old nurse in this hospital. And she comes up to these young, sweet, blonde ingenues. And she's like, I'm all about discipline. But it's very terrifying. And it's as often as not associated, in my experience, with being a man. You're a man, so you're self-disciplined. When I was a little boy, when I was a teenager, I started to complain about this really bad toothache that I had. And my dad, he was like, grow up, take it like a man. I don't want to hear your whining about that. You're making it up. You need to get some stomach, young man. And on this thing, I was like crying. And I mean, actually crying because it hurt so bad. Then finally, I walked out after a few days of this, and my entire mouth, there was a gum issue above my tooth, and my entire mouth, my gum blew open and blood was pouring out everywhere. And I said, can I complain now?
I mean, we got to, not to interrupt, we got to be careful to not, like, we don't want to lean so into, hey, some people are disciplined, some people are not, because I think universally we like disciplined people. If I said, hey, there's plumbers coming to your house now to fix all of the leaks in your house, you have a choice. You want the disciplined plumbers to come or the undisciplined plumbers to come? I don't care who you are. You're saying I want the disciplined plumbers to come. So universally, we desire discipline in people. So I think for us to have this air of like, it's optional, probably not a good move.
Yeah. And that goes back to what I was saying. I found that even personally, when I've been disciplined, my results have been better, more effective, whatever that might be in, whether that's brushing your teeth every day and making sure you're disciplined in your hygiene,
Well, but that's interesting. Really interesting, because that's an area of personality variance that I want to speak to. I recently took a multi-dimensional personality assessment, like sort of leadership and what type of employee or leader are you sort of examination. And the answers to the questions that were then weighed against each other to come up with several defining leadership and organizational characteristics were put together to show where you fell on a scale of 1 to 9. And some conclusions were drawn about that. And in my case, 1 was one extreme of the scale and 9 was the other extreme of the scale. So to give you all an easy example of what one of my outcomes was. On the, they had a scale for energy level that the person has. And this may shock you all, genuinely. So please hold on to your hearts if you need to. But I came up at the highest possible level on energy level. And the man, right? And the man told me, Scott, you should consider seriously an aggressive exercise regimen because that will calm you down. I told him I actually exercise. I lift weights 5 times a week and walk for an hour 7 days a week. And he said, well, heaven help you then if you ever stop. But then on the other area that I ended up being the highest possible score on was with regards to how I respond to punishment. He basically said your personality type will not respond to punishment. You only respond to positive reinforcement. If you are punished, you won't experience it as a motivator. It'll just absolutely crush you. And what was scary about that was I actually have known it's true. And several of the jobs I left were because I felt that the manager was punitive. And my feeling is I hate it. I'm only motivated by positive feedback. I'll just quit it if there's negative feedback. It's just, and it is in my nature. So does that mean I'm actually not self-disciplined?
Well, I think that we're talking about intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation here, right? So I think when we talk about self-discipline, you're talking about like more of what drives you internally. And it kind of goes back to that mission, which was, what we started talking about. I think you'll be more likely to be disciplined in doing the things that you do if you kind of line that up with what your purpose and calling is. When you have to be given a carrot or a stick to be activated, regardless of which one, it may not be the self-discipline piece might not be lining up because maybe that's not necessarily what you want to do anyway. You have to be pushed or prodded or be given praise to do. And then there's a lot of stuff that, I've known you, Scott, for a little while now. You're very self-disciplined in a lot of things, and probably, although the affirmation is very helpful, it probably you still have that calling to do whatever those things are, right? Those is the connecting people to other people. You know what I mean? It's nice to say, someone to say thank you that you did that, but also you just get warmth in your heart to see that they're connecting and doing stuff without them coming back and saying thank you. So I think that self-discipline is there because it lines up with who you are.
Yeah, tying it into the original mission thing. The word discipline has the word disciple in it. Right. So a disciple of what? Right. So, ideally a disciple of your own mission. So if you have aligned yourself with a mission that you feel is worthy, then you should put forth the effort to become disciplined to achieve that mission. Because then you're just failing yourself. If you wanted like I know a guy in the local community who wanted to start a nonprofit organization to help women who are recovering drug addicts that aren't going into treatment because they have children and they don't want to be separated from their children. And there's a lot of effort to start an organization where you can house these women, feed these women, take care of these women, give these women treatment. And the discipline is starting to go down, and now the mission is beginning to crumble. And I think to myself, that was a good mission. Wouldn't you want to step up the discipline in order to achieve that mission? Yeah, you got to fill out some paperwork. Yeah, you got to get people to donate. But damn, that was a good mission. Be disciplined about it.
Yeah. Do you think it's because sometimes that happens because it's not really their mission? You know what I mean? Like sometimes I think that we get somebody else's mission projected on us, or we want the results of the mission and not necessarily the mission. So we see somebody else. Yeah, we see somebody else and like, hey, they're getting a lot of praise for that. I want the praise, right? And it's not even lined up with what you really are or who you are. So you start aligning all of your behaviors to that. And then of course you're going to lack the discipline because it's not even something you value, right? You just wanted the end result.
Well, and that goes as to social pressures and their influence on what we think our mission is. In a way, that's directly what you're talking about. When I worked for the nonprofit that ran the domestic violence shelters, for instance, and homeless shelters, it is inarguable that they have a great mission. Who, except the worst people in the world, would object to providing safe food and shelter and financial support to women that were battered, as well as their pets? Who would object to wanting to provide safety to turtles that were being abused by some,
especially turtles?
Yeah, I got it. I love my turtle.
But like you said, it really wasn't my mission, so I could get behind it, and it was great. Occasionally, I'd be on buses talking to people on a tour bus or wherever on vacation. What do you do? Oh, I work with a company that provides homeless shelters. And they're like,
oh, yeah.
I would feel the halo around my head.
And then later, you get upset with yourself because you're not really happy doing it. But everybody's thinking it's a good thing to do. And you're like, am I a bad human being because I really don't like doing this?
Yeah.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
Yeah, I suck.
But
earlier, Oleg asked, I think this was the question. I'm not able to find it as I'm scrolling up here a little bit, but we'll pretend that Oleg asked, even if he didn't, whether you can live without a mission. What do y'all think?
Yeah.
I think so. I think you could live.
There's a lot of people that live their life as if it's like free form experimental jazz. 1 second they're playing the trumpet, then they're off on the edges, vomiting on the floor, and then occasional singing.
In the Air Force, we call that all thrust, no vector.
There you go. Yeah. Actually, can I speak to this for a second? This is actually, I sat down and had a very long conversation one time with a researcher at a local college by us that only studies ant colonies. And I asked him about his research, and I asked him, why does he study ants? And he said that ants and bees are as close to humans from a social perspective when compared to any other animal, because they're organized in hundreds of thousands in a perfectly organized structure, all geared towards one mission. And he said that when you look at an ant colony, he goes, about 10% of the ants will maintain the colony, extending out the tunnels, moving eggs around. About 10% will hunt for food and take some risks to, go into your picnic and steal sugar, right? And he goes, and then about 80% do nothing. And I said, what do you mean they do nothing? Like my, libertarian sidekick, nothing, like, goddamn lazy ant. I was like, what do you mean nothing? And he's like, literally nothing. Like they'll go in like one tunnel and then they'll go out for a little bit and then they'll talk to another ant and then go to another tunnel. He's like, but the majority of the day, like they just eat and do nothing. And he goes, and that's kind of the way society is too. So I think that we might be hanging out with a lot of the 20%, but I think there is a big portion of society that just like they don't have a mission. They're just here.
Yeah, and I think it's like even more, and I think on a broad scale, I think you're 100% right. I see it all the time, right? Like I think that there's a lot of I kind of go back to, and I hate bringing this up because it's so like cliche, but the whole Maslow's hierarchy. I think there's a lot of people that are just trying to survive life. They're trying to be able to provide for themselves, and there's such a huge percentage of that they don't get to really provide their actual. They don't get to live to their mission and provide what their gift is really to the world, because they're just constantly just trying to catch up, and I think that there's accountability there. There's a lot of other things, but I think that there's a lot of circumstances that leads people to those places.
Well, but then there's another argument around that. This is going to sound very profane to say, so I'll be good to say it naturally, which is, perhaps those people actually do have no mission or purpose. Maybe we live in a society, we just can't face it as individuals or as a people, or we can't say it out loud because we live in a democratic society where allegedly everyone matters equally, at least from a political perspective, but really from an entertainment perspective, from a consumer perspective, from an economic perspective, everyone kind of does matter. And that's, I suspect most people would say, is a good thing. But really, when it comes to social function and social necessity, maybe a lot of people don't matter. I mean, I think I've told this story. I don't know if either of you were on this show before when I told it. But of course, this conversation happened when I worked for the government. And not the military, by the way. I wasn't working for the military. People were on a mission. This was government. Walking Dead was this brand new series, and I was like, oh, and I would be one of those survivors. I said I would have. I had maybe known about Negan, and I was like, I would be the one that got the baseball bat and wrapped that.
Well, I mean, you're a big human being, so I think you would survive. I mean,
yeah, and I said, and I would make sure that everyone was protected and all that. And I was like, and I would find a way to build a colony, and I'd rule it. And I said, what about you? And she said, oh no. I'm one of the background people that would just die instantly. I'd be one of the zombies that you kill, one of the hordes.
You know who I would be? I would be the guy that got bit, but try to cover it up the whole time. I slowly, and I'm sweating, and you're like, what the hell's wrong with you? Like, I'm good.
Put you down. It'll be the dramatic end of the season. Brian Goldsack gets put down. Never
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Please continue with the story.
Yeah, no, but you know what that's saying is that it occurred to me that going to Joe's point, yeah, maybe I'm hanging around and having these sorts of conversations with people that are the ones that are actually interested in having a deeper functionary role within society. I mean, Brian, I think you were the one that told me about an economist named Shunter. Was that you? And I recently bought one of his books, and that's not entirely what he's saying. He's talking about disruption and all that sort of stuff, but it actually seemed kind of embedded behind a lot of his thinking. And so, but is that elitist of us to say? And there was a book in the 90s that came out called In Defense of Elitism. And I don't remember a lot about the book, but it was saying, look, this idea of egalitarianism and everyone having a purpose and everyone having a function is sort of, and everyone being equal contributors in society, it's all bunk. We're not all equal. Now, we're not unequal based on a lot of the arbitrary discernments that we have used so far, like race or location of where you were born or gender or these ridiculous superficial things. But on a fundamental level, we don't all have the same intellectual capacity. We don't have the same artistic capacity, and we don't all have the same level of ambition. Thoughts?
I have a lot of thoughts, but I can rant right now, but I don't want to. Joe, did you have something you want to say?
I want to hear you rant.
Yeah. Sometimes, did you ever hear that idea of NPCs, like non-playable characters in video games?
Yeah.
Sometimes I think that that's a real thing. Like there's just kind of like people that exist. I have people in my own family that I would consider to be NPCs. They eat, they don't work, they hang out, they watch Keeping Up with the Kardashians, they put pictures on Instagram, and that is what that's them. That's their entire existence. What is the purpose, though? So I'm going to tie this back into the ant guy. He said there's a reason for that 80%. And I was dying to hear what the reason for the 80%
Me
was.
too.
He goes, it is for the survival of the colony and the lifestyle of that particular colony. This whole 80-20 thing, they call it the Pareto's principle. Things naturally tend to fashion themselves in an 80-20 like ratio, and humanity appears to be that way as well. Okay. Like for example, like 20% of the S&P 500 index companies make up almost all of the earnings for the S&P 500. Okay.
Wow.
So, but with that being said, the purpose of the 80% is in an ant colony. Let's say Scott comes by and he finds the ant colony and he dumps water on the ant colony and takes out like 30% of them. There is a benefit to the colony to still have a large percentage of living, breathing ants within that colony in order to get the colony going again. He goes, so there's something to be said for having a whole bunch of just Americans that are well-fed and alive, because if Russia one day tries to come in here and take over, there's more of us than there is of them. And if a lot of us die, there's enough well-fed Americans to kind of repopulate and live the American way of life in light of some catastrophe that will be okay. So there's an argument to be made that the purpose could almost just be like to be here, to be citizens, to like be part of this lifestyle.
Potentially be bullet sponges.
There's a draft.
So I think I'm conflicted there because I see what really happens in life, right? So I do believe that like a lot of people just participate in life, right? And then there's also a lot of people that just create conflict because that's what they do, and that's what makes them feel better because they're just wearing a wet diaper everywhere they go, right? And I always wonder, like, what is the purpose of this? What is the purpose of this interaction right now, right? Like,
being so dramatic.
What am I supposed to learn from this, right? So I think I just try to live in a because I think that that's so I think that I told my wife this one time. The 48 Laws of Power, that book. I've read through that, and
Awesome book.
yeah, and I
Robert
believe
Greene.
it's true, but I don't want to subscribe to that life, right? So then I make myself purposely feel ignorant to it because I choose to go a different route on how, although when I read it, I know it's true, right? So I think the way I relate this to what we're talking about is I believe this is a thing, but I like to choose to turn a blind eye to that probably reality to try to look into the world where I want to live in, which is where everybody actually has a legitimate purpose, and maybe they haven't explored it yet or discovered it yet, and this could be a blind optimist Pollyannish version of Joe Bogdan, who maybe people don't expect a senior enlisted leader in the Air Force to feel this way, but I like to think that, I mean, I think that's the world where I would want, if I had children, or at least my turtle, to grow up in. You know what I mean? In that environment. But I believe, you brought up some libertarian views. I subscribe to those. You know what I mean? I believe in that too. So I always find myself conflicted in a lot of these discussions with people are participating in life and they're frustrating, and they're dragging an organization down oftentimes, and I just wonder what their purpose really is. Is it really just to survive, and that way we have enough people standing up as targets, or do they have something that they haven't actually realized yet to be able to provide to the game?
Joe, do you ever wonder if your purpose may one day be to be an entrepreneur yourself?
I hate business.
Well, then that's a challenge.
Yeah, that's gonna be a challenge.
So
I like
far,
the
so good.
entrepreneurial. Yeah, I like the entrepreneurial mindset. Of problem solving and innovation, and I think and a lot of those things. But I think when it comes down to the actual, the nuts and bolts of it, I think that and this is probably going on a tangent. I think that people shouldn't identify their mission that they should be on from the highlights of what they see, right? So like for me, I always talk about my career. When's it time for me to retire? It's not when I'm tired of hanging out with airmen and developing and growing them, because that will never end. I think it's time for me to retire when I'm tired of all the peripheral stuff, the administrivia, the extra physical training tests, fitness assessments. When I'm so salty about those things, I think it's time for me to retire, because I'm not a good example anymore. Because I'll never be tired of doing the things I get to do every day. But so I think that when we look at missions and stuff, we see the shiny part of that, and we're like, oh, I think that's what I'm meant to do. Well, look at the crap that comes along with it, and are you willing to tolerate and grind through that? And if you're not, maybe that's not really your area too.
It's weird because I know that you're in the military. I know your resume as well as anybody, simply by virtue of the nature of the relationship that we've had over the years. But it's weird because I perceive you in my mind as an entrepreneur, even though I know you're not. and it's interesting because it goes as to then, to me, mission, internal mission, what your mission is, and how it is being perceived in the world, and when they're irreconcilable, what's really going on there.
Yeah, I think entrepreneurs, like I used to always think of it as just business related, but I think it's bringing value to the world and being able to solve problems, right, and get through situations. So I think that in that respect, I respect the entrepreneurial mindset. I don't know about the just the business side of things,
They're in that 10%. Those are the ones that go out and try to find the sugar to bring back to the colony. One thing I will say, not to go back to the ant thing, but I think
it's fascinating. Please do.
Yeah,
well, it's not the ants now. I think in the United States, I think we are a consumer-driven economy. So I'll be the finance nerd for a moment here. The 80% serves to fuel the consumer machine that is the United States, right? Like we can plug money into that 80% like we did during COVID, and within months they're spending it on cool like horned hats and food and clothes and vacations, and they put that money right back into the economy, and they keep that thing going. They keep the economy going. So I think that in a consumer-driven economy, just having a lot of consumers is a very good thing. So having more of them grow keeps the economy going, and then the entrepreneurs find new goofy things to sell to them, and then we produce and strengthen that way.
Well, it's interesting because I would love to hear your thoughts on who this economy then in that scenario is running for. And by the way, I actually strongly agree with you about that. I have very passionate feelings about it. B, it's interesting. I was talking to my husband last night. We were fantasizing about our life in the future when my time at stardom finally comes.
When you retire.
and when my time at stardom comes, or his time, or whatever this fantasy actually happens, well, we have another house in LA that we just have to buy, or we have to rent. Actually, we were talking about that. We would figure out whatever was worth, and we might consider renting if the price was worth it, and all that, a whole host of factors. And one of the things that we said is we enjoy living frugally and counterculturally. We love not spending our money in restaurants. My husband used to own a restaurant, so he cooks well. And so we would have him cooking and storing in the refrigerator here and there. And we were like going on this whole thing. And we explicitly said we would want a studio apartment, just like we have here in New York City, because we're not spending money on pointless stuff that way. You know, you have a huge, gigantic house, and I'm not making a judgment about anyone that does, but from our value systems perspective, what that does is it puts you in a position where you have to fill the house, you have to decorate the yard, you have to buy a house or a car, because in order to sustain that, you need to spend gas, you need to have transportation back and forth. We're not set up as a culture to have low income or low cost forms of transportation. And so by saving money in a whole host of ways, by getting a small apartment, was what we're, like I said, a studio apartment, we were actually setting ourselves up to exploit the consumer economy in a sense by using its benefit to the bare minimum, me as an entrepreneur selling services to those that are wanting it and hopefully will really derive benefit from it, and then doing things like investing our money or having other ways of building our own wealth, which is not the mentality that, in my opinion, you see the majority, the 80%, probably even more than that, in a consumer economy actually living.
Yeah. I mean, the stats back that up, Scott. 80% of people in retirement live off the government in some way. Combination of lower income senior housing, Social Security, and subsidized like food stamps, access card. 10% live with their kids. 10% actually do what they want during retirement. That LA lifestyle. That's the Pareto principle again. You'll see it over and over again everywhere. Retirement lifestyles, employment, it's like everywhere.
Yeah, I think some of that has to go back to the original topic of the mission and the calling, the purpose and all that. And I think a lot of people overly consume, and then we feed off of that because they're looking for distractions from a void that they have on what they should be doing. So it makes them feel better if they buy the cool horned hat for a moment and they get to take a picture and post it on Instagram, and then that feeling fades away really quickly, and so I think that happens quite often, where I think, and I'm not saying that this is what you're doing, Scott, but this is what I like to do. I think about like trying to minimize what I have going on, or how much stuff I have, or all these other distractions, so that I can actually live to the purpose that I'm doing and do what I want to do, versus having to constantly have 12 programs running in the background of all these other things I got to maintain, sustain, and operate,
Do you believe, Joe, that if everyone knew their purpose, we would be able to function as a society? Because what I'm sort of gathering based on what you're saying is that we would be living in a society where everyone was a leader.
Yeah.
And would those of us that are leaders tolerate that for 1 second?
There it is.
Yeah. I don't know. I think that if everybody had their meaning and purpose, I think that's just a component of it. I think you still have to have that self-discipline. I think that they play off each other, but I think that just they talk about I think Daniel Pink talks about it. It was like innovation without self-discipline is just a bunch of ideas. You know what I mean? So there's no execution there. So I think that if everybody had their purpose, but they didn't have some of that. And now I think that if you have your purpose and your mission, that it's more likely you'll be disciplined towards it, because at least you have an idea of that's what you want. But I think there's still some personal accountability there that you have to be able to move towards it. How many people are just absolutely talented, but they have no discipline when it comes to sports or whatever else? How many people have that? That's probably even their calling, their God's gift. They gifted them with that talent, and then they just squander it because they have no discipline or they have other issues going on. I think we'd still have a lot of those issues. I think it'd be a better place. I think that we would have a society where people would, if they could self-lead at least well, and have that mission, that I think we as a society would have more, we would be able to reap the benefits of that, having a lot more, not everybody's purpose is to be a leader. Not everybody's purpose is to do some of these things. I think some people's purpose is to provide good art and stuff and creativity to the world. So I just think that if everybody would have that discipline and that purpose, I think that we would live in a world of abundance, and I don't mean abundance of just material stuff. I mean abundance of great ideas, and but we would screw that up. We're humans, so we're flawed. We'll jack that up too.
I agree, Scott. I think that you can't have a nation of leaders, right? Mm-hmm. Because what are they leading if we're all leaders, right?
A lot of headbutting going on there.
Yeah. Well, there's nobody to follow. Like, what are you leading? If everyone's a leader, you have to lead people. So there has to be some people that follow these leaders. So if everyone has like clearly, I guess my thing is, would anyone say my mission is to be a follower? I want to follow this person or this organization to fulfill their mission.
Well, that goes though as to whether we are operating in some 20% echo chamber though. There was a show. There's a reality show that I used to occasionally watch. I can't believe I'm saying this.
Kardashians. He's going to say it.
No, I never stooped quite that low.
Oh my
well,
goodness.
maybe there was one called The Swan that I watched, in which people had plastic surgery. Then after all their head to toe plastic surgery, they were in a beauty contest.
I've been into Love Is Blind recently myself.
Yeah. So we all scrape the bottom sometime.
Yeah. But maybe watching that with my wife every now and then.
There was one called Wife Swap that I used to watch. And basically what they would do, for anyone who wasn't familiar with it, Joe, please don't tell me none of your enlisted people have heard about this before.
I think, some of our older folks have probably heard of that.
So, and Oleg, if you haven't heard of it, you just need to shut up, okay? Don't make us feel old. Now, Wife Swap, what happened was they would arrange for the wives of two couples to move in with the other couple. And they, of course, always chose couples that were opposite in their beliefs. And so this was during the Iraq War, and one of them was an anti-war activist wife who, of course, lived in San Francisco or somewhere like that. And she swapped families with a conservative church-going Bible lady from rural Oklahoma.
And they really... Boom! Yeah. They went right at it.
Yeah, okay. And the anti-war activists decided to do some community organizing in this Oklahoma suburb against the war, and so she got some of the neighborhood women there, and it was fascinating because whether you agree with her or not about a lot of things, it was undeniable that this activist woman was a leader. Because let's face it, she went into the middle of Oklahoma where she had to know the political leanings were going to be opposed to her, and she was trying to organize a rally. And she didn't care that she was going to get catcalled and booed and face all sorts of rejection. She did it. So, okay. But then it was interesting because when she was talking to the other housewives, she said, you can't just believe what our leaders are telling you about this. They have motivations sometimes that aren't clear to us. People's lives are being sacrificed there. Shouldn't we know why they're being sacrificed there? People are coming back maimed and injured, and they're not getting all of these sorts of arguments that at least merited consideration, even if you didn't agree with them, in my opinion. And the housewives were like, no, We don't like that here. We believe in trusting what our leaders say.
Hmm.
We believe in just following. We don't need to be doing our own thing. We don't need to be pushing back on everything they do. We voted them to be leaders, so we give that to them and they do it. And that got me thinking, well, again, maybe my perception of leadership and what people want and are thinking and all of that is totally wrong. I could never imagine someone saying that, but clearly people were on national television.
Easy way out. I mean, the whole U.S. system was designed to be skeptical of the government. So if you're like a nationalist and you're patriotic to like the red, white, and blue, look at how they structured the red, white, and blue. The country was structured because we don't trust leaders. So if you're actually a patriot, you should have a natural skepticism towards those that govern you. Not necessarily, it doesn't mean you have to disagree with everything they do. If the policy makes sense, it makes sense. And if it's to benefit you, go with it. Like, don't be like outright recalcitrant, but have some, like, be like that lady, you know, question when people are dying, if it's actually worth it.
Yeah. And Melody has seen Wife Swap. I'm glad to hear that someone else watched it besides me, Melody. And yes, it was intense sometimes. They had, just as an aside, I mean, again, very interesting situation. They had I think they had a husband a wife switch with a gay couple. And so, and it was a little bit odd. And so the one of the gay partners was the wife of a straight man who came home to wife swap, finding another man. That was intense. I think
How did that go?
I think it lasted all of 2 days. I was like, come on.
Really?
Seriously, people.
Probably have more money in those 2 days than he had.
Yeah. Joe, you've got to have something to say. Say it.
I think that when it comes to that, I mean, even in the military, everybody thinks that we're a bunch of drones that just follow orders. But in reality, we try to cultivate a culture of reasoned dissent. You know, you should be able to ask that question. We are promoting diversity of not just what we look like, but diversity of thought. We literally try to hire people that have different perspectives than we do into positions of leadership so that we can have that discussion and ask the why behind things. Groupthink is not something we promote. You know, but there are times where it's coloring time, you know, I mean, like, we appreciate your thought, but we're moving forward on this, you know, and that's where I think that we try to hone our discernment on things. There are going to be things that we don't know all the answers to just by the nature of our jobs. Like, we're just not going to be told certain things, but you got to go execute mission, right? There's going to be times like that. And we just have to pray and hope and have faith that there's a greater good behind it. But there's always a skepticism. We're allowed to have that. And I think that I encourage healthy skepticism amongst everybody. You know, we should always we were given this frontal lobe for a reason. We should question things. You know, that's my personal perspective. I appreciate it. Sometimes my the teachable moments I have with some of my subordinates, because I created an environment where I want them to be able to voice their opinions and their dissenting opinions for sure. But if they do it in the wrong way, I have a conversation with them. You know, because I think that's a teachable moment, because it doesn't matter if you have a great message or you're correct, but if you don't communicate it correctly, nobody wants to listen to it, then it's pointless. You know, so we have those discussions as well. So I don't know if that really answered the question, but I think that for me, I think those are very important things that we should, as not just as Americans, but as humans, we should be able to develop those differing opinions, educate ourselves on the issues, to be able to have an opinion that freaking matters and is relevant, and also be able to learn how to hone the communication skills to be able to communicate that reasoned dissent in a way that people will be able to consume it. And if you can't figure out one of those legs, you're not going to, it's almost irrelevant, you know?
Well said. Well said.
Mm-hmm. Joe, you know who Ryan and I would be in the zombie apocalypse? Who would you be?
Man, you know what? I'd probably be whatever you would need as the grinder to be able to get stuff done. You know what I mean? Like lead small teams to go execute a mission of going to get the food or whatever. I think that would be
I love it.
me, because I love, I talk about it all the time. I say I lead 600 people. I manage, resources. At this point, I get to enjoy some leadership here and there, but when I was a young senior airman, I was an E4, and I got to lead a 4-person crew on jobs or whatever it might be. That was the most leadership I did, and I think leadership needs to be done up close and within proximity. And I think that I would just really relish the opportunity to be able to lead a small team to go take care of business, take care of the people. That's what I would do.
Joe, every word that comes out of your mouth reminds me of what a treasure I believe that you are. How glad I am that I know you, and how grateful I am that you were on this show. Can you tell us again a little bit about yourself and where and how people can find out more about you and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. For me, I'm a part of this amazing team called the Llama Leadership Team. We have a website called llama-leadership.com. We have a podcast called The Llama Lounge. You can find out on all platforms. And really, we started off as young non-commissioned officers, which is like lower middle management guys from different backgrounds, different career fields within the military. And we decided that, we all had a passion to grow ourselves and to help others reach their potential. So eventually we created a company, which we make no money. So once again, not a good businessman, right? But we promote leadership, resiliency, and just learning options for people. We try to put out products to help them, especially in the service, in the military. Most of our audience is military, but not everybody. Our superpower is to take complex things and put it into consumable items that people can use. When it comes to leadership, just resilience, like take care of yourself. So we have a lot of different resources on our Llama Leadership website, and we continuously promote conversations with amazing people like you. I can't wait to have Scott, once again, you back on the lounge sometime.
Can't wait.
And my new friend here, I can't wait to have you on the lounge, sir, and we'll have some great conversations. And that's what we do. We talk, and what really drives me for this podcast is we're not always blessed with great leadership that wants to invest in us. It's just the way it is. There's once again, you get the 20%, you're happy. Sometimes you get that 20% leader, right? Sometimes you don't. And I think that a big thing for me is I want to create that environment and have those conversations that a young senior airman Joe Bogdan or a young Staff Sergeant Joe Bogdan would have really been able to gain if I wasn't in an environment where I got that growth. This is another platform. So that's what we do. We are on episode 140 something, and we're still going at it. We're still going at it.
Amazing. Brian, we've talked a lot about leadership tonight as well, which is often associated with success, although heaven knows not every leader is successful. but we'll just pretend that little contradiction doesn't exist. And talk to us a little bit again about what you do and where people can find out all about your Unbelievable Success Fundamentals podcast.
Thank you. And Joe, really nice meeting you tonight.
Great meeting you, Brian.
So my co-host Chris Sykes and I run a show called Success Fundamentals. The show is effectively a case study on what it means to be a successful person. Success is one of those terms you hear people throw around a lot, but we really are trying to dig into what it means. Is it a spiritual thing? Is it a physical thing? Is it a relationship thing? Is it a financial thing? What does it actually mean to look back on your life and say, hey, I was a successful person, job well done? So we get people from all different walks of life, a lot of entrepreneurs, people that work in social work. Recently, we've had spiritual leaders, we've had psychologists, physiologists, trainers, basically any discipline you can think of that covers mind, body, and spirit. We've had them on the show. Today, I just did an interview with a gentleman that specializes just in politics to see if in some way politics or the government has a responsibility to you achieving success. So we're
Mm.
trying to peel the whole thing apart. So if it's, we're having a good time with it, and you can find us at successfundamentals.com.
That's
Absolutely love it. Now, one definition I have of success is when you create something that brings pride, dignity, and joy to populations that otherwise wouldn't have it in this world, that are on the margins and people like to forget about. One of the prior guests on this show is a man named Patrick Bardsley, who founded the company that is the sponsor of this show, Spectrum Designs. Spectrum Designs is an apparel and accessory printing and embroidery shop that almost exclusively employs people that are on the autistic spectrum, a population that has a close to 90% unemployment rate. They provide real, meaningful jobs with career paths. And if anyone ever is in Long Island and Port Washington, which is where their main location is, and wants to just feel good about yourself, or just feel like you needed an antidote to all of the horrors that are out in the world, walk through their plant. Not only will you learn how t-shirts are printed and embroidered, but you will be stunned by the joy and happiness and engagement of these folks that were throwaways until this incredible place found them and turned them into something beautiful. I'm going to turn the show over to a video by our sponsor, learn about them. If you're watching the show or if you are listening to it, please consider them if you ever need custom t-shirts or other apparel.
T-shirt. Yeah, let's show them.